From orbit, Earth looked unbothered. Clouds drifted over continents like they always had. Oceans reflected sunlight with their familiar calm shimmer. But beneath the peaceful surface, something ancient and instinctual had reawakened. Fear. Not the kind born of politics or war, but the primal terror of being preyed upon by something beyond understanding. The Virek fleet, 12 silent monoliths, hovered in perfect synchronization above major population centers. Their ships did not emit any known signals, bore no visible engines, and ignored every human attempt at contact. The UN coalition tried everything. Interstellar radio transmissions in hundreds of languages, light signals, even attempts at mathematical communication. Nothing. The Virek didn't reply, didn't. They didn't acknowledge. They simply watched until they struck. The attack on Johannesburg hadn't been announced. It hadn't even been noticed at first. The energy pulse was silent, instantaneous. No explosion, no fallout. Just a shimmering column of violet light from the alien ship above, and when it faded, the city center was gone. Buildings, roads, people. A perfect circle of absence remained. The land beneath fused into a black glass basin. Panic spread globally within minutes. Military units were deployed. Skywatch networks went into overdrive. And Captain Erin Voss was pulled from her quiet retirement and flown via suborbital jet to the Alpine Coalition Command bunker. She hadn't wanted to come back, but then again, she hadn't expected to watch the Earth get systematically erased. The command center was a hive of controlled chaos. Data flickered across floor-to-ceiling displays, maps updated in real time, each with red rings expanding outward from the Virek ships. Kill radii. Every general, scientist, and political liaison was talking, arguing, panicking. Voss stood alone. At the back of the room, arms crossed. She'd seen war. Real war. This wasn't it. This was sterilization. She turned to Dr. Naoko Ishida, a physicist from Kyoto Institute, who was watching slow-motion satellite footage of the Virek beam strike frame by frame. "You find anything?" Voss asked. Naoko shook her head. "It's like reality itself folds at the edge of the beam, quantum disassembly at an unthinkable scale. It's not destruction as we know it, it's removal. Like deleting a file," Voss murmured. Naoko nodded grimly. "Only, there's no recycle bin. 3 more cities fell that day. Santiago, Nairobi, and Jakarta. Then the Virek stopped again for 48 hours, a global ceasefire with no communication." It made no sense. During that time, Voss reviewed every piece of data the UN Intelligence Council had gathered. It wasn't much. The Virek had no visible crew. Their hulls absorbed scans like a black hole. Their attack pattern wasn't based on military targets. It was based on population density. They weren't fighting a war. They were cleaning house. Voss stared at the orbital feed one more time. The ships never moved, never spun, never blinked, just waited, and something inside. Her clicked. "They're machines," she said aloud. "Not just ships. They're part of a network." Naoko blinked. "That would explain the synchronicity. You think it's AI?" "I think it's worse," Voss replied. "I think it's a system that doesn't see us as alive." That night, she went dark. She took a personal shuttle to an old NATO bunker under Berlin, one of the few not connected to modern EarthNet. It ran on diesel backup and paper maps, analog systems. She called in a handful of veterans, hackers, and dropouts who owed her favors, or owed the world a debt. People like Riker Don, Black Market AI Rogue.lt. Mari Quinn, ex-Space Commando discharged, for creative disobedience. Tariq Bell, a demolitionist who once took down a Martian mining syndicate with a pickaxe and chewing gum. This wasn't going to be a government operation. This was going to be dirty, dangerous, and desperate. "Captain," Voss stood in the bunker's dim light, chalking attack vectors onto an old steel wall. Her voice was steady, but her eyes burned. The Virek can erase cities. They've got tech we don't understand, but they rely on logic, predictability, control. That's our wedge. That's where we live. Human chaos. They came expecting submission. Let's show them surprise. The team exchanged glances, wary, but ready. From this point forward, Voss said, holstering her sidearm, we fight not to win a war. She paused, then grinned. We fight to remind them what it means, to bleed for every inch. The Berlin bunker was freezing. Concrete walls, flickering lights, and backup generators fueled by ancient diesel tanks gave it the atmosphere of a forgotten war movie. But inside, it pulsed with purpose. Captain Aaron Voss stood over a dented steel table, staring at blueprints of a decommissioned orbital railgun platform, Gorgon 3, long thought useless. Its digital control systems had been gutted years ago during demilitarization, but it still had a direct low-Earth shot at the Virek monolith parked over Europe. We get Gorgon 3 online, Voss said. We can hit the Virek with something. They won't see coming. Riker Don scoffed, chewing on the end of a soldered cable. That platform runs on vacuum tubes. Half the wiring is glass. It was obsolete before I was born. Exactly, Voss said. Which means the Virek won't. Detect it, hack it, or expect it. You want a weapon they can't adapt to? Give them one they've never bothered to understand. Lieutenant Mari Quinn leaned on the table, scarred hands tracing the old schematic. We'll need 3 teams. One to hijack a drone lifter to get us into orbit. One to retrofit the Gorgon platform. And one to distract the orbital surveillance while we fire, Voss grinned. We'll be the first humans to punch back. Let's make it count. Operation Ghostlight began 2 nights later. Voss's team moved fast. No satellites, no EarthNet communication, just line-of-sight radios and paper. Instructions. The Virek had learned to intercept and interpret every encrypted system humanity relied on, but not good old-fashioned analog Team 1, led by Quinn, commandeered an old spacelift freighter from a scrapyard in Czechoslovakia. It hadn't flown in 15 years. It groaned and spat flame as they reactivated it, duct-taping its life support systems and reprogramming it with vacuum-punched code cards. Team 2, engineers, welders, and former orbital miners, were already aboard Gorgon 3 by the time the EE freighter reached low orbit. They found it floating in silence, half frozen, half depressurized. But its core magnetic accelerator was intact. Team 3, led by Voss and Riker, staged a distraction on the ground, a series of thermal and electronic decoys scattered across northern Europe. Fires, heat blooms, fake transmissions. It was chaos, deliberate, beautiful chaos, and for the first time, the Virek blinked. High above Earth, the moment came. Charging the railgun, came the voice from Gorgon 3. Capacitors at 60%. 80? Target locked. Through the outdated analog targeting scope, they could see the underbelly of the Virek monolith, dark, seamless, and motionless. Riker's voice crackled through the radio. Still no reaction. They don't know we're coming. Voss nodded, watching from her cold perch in the hills of Bavaria, wrapped in camo and snow. Let's give them their first surprise. Firing. A deep, gut-shaking boom echoed in orbit as Gorgon 3 discharged a hyperdense tungsten slug the size of a car. No warhead, no electronics, just physics and hate, launched at Mach 10. It hit the Virek ship dead center. For a fraction of a second, the monolith shimmered. Then the weight surface fractured just slightly, but it was enough. Glowing white stress lines spidered outward. A chunk of alien armor the size of a football field peeled off and began tumbling toward Earth, burning as it entered the atmosphere. From the surface, the sky lit up. People across Europe stared upward, mouths open, as a piece of the invincible enemy became a falling star. Back in orbit, alarm screamed on Gorgon 3. They've detected us. Virek drones inbound. Evacuate, Voss snapped into the comms. "Dump the platform! Scatter and disappear!" Quinn's voice came back. "Already moving." Back on Earth, Voss sat in the snow watching the stars. That was the first time she saw them react. A faint shimmer of movement. A single Virek monolith rotated, just a few degrees. Not much, but enough to confirm something Voss had prayed for. They felt it. Later that night, broadcasts lit up Earth's underground networks. Grainy footage of the impact, a burning sky, a signal flare in humanity's darkest hour. They called it the first blow. And in every corner of the planet, people whispered the same thing. Maybe they can be. They stored the alien wreckage in a hangar beneath an abandoned hydroelectric dam in western Norway. The location was cold, remote, and off-grid, exactly what Voss needed. No satellites, no AI surveillance, just reinforced concrete and stubborn. Engineers bundled in thermal coats. The Virek hull fragment was the size of a semi-truck trailer. It hissed and pulsed faintly with internal energy, even though it had broken clean off the orbital monolith. The surface looked liquid, but felt solid, and no one could tell if it was metal, ceramic, or something else entirely. Riker Don circled it like a predator, instruments in hand. He hadn't shaved in days. His eyes were bloodshot. He spoke in mutters, half to Voss, half to himself. "This stuff isn't passive," he said finally. "It's reacting to observation." Voss frowned. "You mean it knows we're watching it?" Riker nodded. "Quantum resonance. When we're not actively measuring it, the surface shifts. When we observe it, boom, locked form." Voss narrowed her eyes. "So the material behaves differently depending on whether it's being watched." "Exactly," Riker said. "It's the physical embodiment of observer-based logic. The Virek ships are likely the same. They exist in a stable form because their systems constantly monitor themselves. Self-observing, self-regulating, logical, but rigid." Voss crossed her arms. "And that's their weakness." Riker looked up. "I think so. The Virek don't do improvisation. Their tech, hell, maybe their entire species, relies on systems that obey rules, patterns, order. And we don't," Voss said, half grinning. Over the next few days, Riker ran simulations. The team bombarded the hull fragment with contradictory signals, electromagnetic pulses, randomized data streams, noise patterns with no symmetry. The material pulsed erratically in response, as if confused. "What happens if we push it further?" Voss asked. "We crash their entire network," Riker said. He showed her a schematic of the Virek's orbital formation. "They're not just 12 separate ships. They're a distributed processing array, a hive intelligence, one consciousness, split across platforms. Like one brain with 12 hemispheres," Voss said. "Exactly. And if we introduce irrational input, nonsense patterns, recursive loops, emotional feedback, they won't know how to process it." She stared at the glowing lines. "So we hit their mind with a human migraine. Meanwhile, around the world, the resistance movement exploded. News of the first blow had spread like wildfire. Even without official broadcasts, it seeped through black market radios, pirate networks, and whispered rumors. Across North America, hackers repurposed outdated analog gear to transmit encrypted chaos patterns. In South America, resistance cells used coded graffiti and synchronized flash mobs to confuse local Virek surveillance drones. In Africa and Southeast Asia, engineers dug up centuries-old power sources, using steam, gasoline, even kinetic energy to power sabotage ops that slipped. Through the Virek's modern filter, the world was improvising, and it was working. The Virek didn't escalate. They hesitated. One of the monoliths even retreated for a full hour before returning to position. It was the first time they had ever displayed anything resembling indecision. Voss watched the footage with grim satisfaction. "They're thinking," she said. "We're forcing them to think. That's dangerous. For them." Later, alone in the cold quiet of the Norwegian night, Voss stared up at the sky. The stars were faint, but she could still see the shape of the closest Virek ship, a speck of black against the stars. She spoke aloud, not to her team, not to Earth, but to them. "You came here expecting to delete data," she whispered. "You didn't realize we're not data. We're noise. We are irrational, broken, brilliant noise, and we fight like it." Behind her, Riker approached. "The virus is ready," he said. "First tests worked. If we inject it into their drone systems, it'll spread," Voss finished. And once it did, the Virek would face something they had never encountered before, a species that couldn't be predicted. The Virek didn't understand chaos, not the kind humans wielded like a weapon. When the first wave of coordinated sabotage missions went live, the aliens didn't react with overwhelming force. They didn't retreat either. They paused. And that pause was all the proof Voss needed. The virus was working, and human unpredictability had lodged itself like a splinter in the Virek's mechanical brain. Across the globe, sparks flew in the dark. In Mumbai, a resistance cell jammed. The Virek's patrol drones, by detonating thousands of fireworks programmed to detonate in irrational patterns. The drones began spinning erratically, their targeting systems blinking, failing, short-circuiting under the onslaught of illogical stimuli. The crowd watching didn't know it yet, but they had just become part of the war. In Detroit, a forgotten factory was turned into a radio tower that blared a randomized data loop encoded with recursive nonsense poetry, laughter samples, and primal screams. The signal confused every nearby Virek drone's auditory receptor, forcing them to crash into buildings or retreat entirely. In the Sahara, a caravan of solar-modified dune buggies zigzagged across the dunes with holographic decoys and reflective plating, bouncing signal echoes to create false readings across hundreds of square kilometers. The Virek warship assigned to North Africa failed to track a single human for 48 hours. They called it the Guerrilla Spark Campaign. Each action was small, but together they created global noise that punched holes in the Virek's perfect machine logic. Captain Voss stood over a rusted table in the Berlin bunker, staring at a map dotted with blinking red and green lights, resistance flare points. Riker leaned beside her, arms crossed. "The virus is spreading faster than I expected. They still haven't figured out it's not a traditional malware package." "That's because it's not," Voss replied. "It's human behavior, encrypted, weaponized irrationality. You didn't write a program, Riker. You made a digital nervous breakdown," he grinned. "Think they're ready for therapy?" Voss shook her head, half smiling. "They're machines. They don't believe in therapy." Then her face darkened. "But they'll believe in pain." Not everything went smoothly. In Mexico City, a cell was compromised mid-operation. The Virek didn't just neutralize the team. They unmade them, erased the entire city block, and then rebuilt the surface into featureless obsidian, as if mocking human effort. In Tokyo, a rogue faction went too far, releasing a nanite storm into the atmosphere to disrupt Virek scanning tech. It worked, but it also melted half a hospital wing and killed hundreds. The resistance had to disown the group publicly. Voss knew this was the cost of messy war, of using fire to fight steel. But she also knew something else. The aliens were learning, and so were the humans. Then came the signal glitch. A lone resistance hacker in Lagos intercepted a strange frequency burst from the Virek ship stationed overhead. It was nothing like their usual clean, silent signals. It was distorted, repetitive, broken. Define human purpose. The message repeated every 13 seconds, bouncing erratically across a dozen frequencies, then cutting out. When Riker reviewed the data, his hands trembled. "They're asking for definitions now," he said. "They're trying to understand us." "They've never needed to before," Voss replied. "We were noise. Now we're the virus." Across the world, humans fought in shadows, with chaos, with old tools and wild ideas. The resistance became something organic, fluid, borderless. No central command, no predictable moves. Each success added to the storm. Each loss made the storm wilder. The Virek began to hesitate before deploying beam strikes. Some drones now hovered aimlessly, processing corrupted input. Others turned in circles or fired into empty space. In Brazil, a fleet of drones simply shut down mid-patrol and fell like dead leaves from the sky. For the first time, humans weren't just surviving, they were winning. One unpredictable spark at a time. Captain Voss stood on the roof of a resistance hideout in Lisbon, watching the sky pulse as the Virek ship overhead made subtle, nervous adjustments. She pulled her coat tighter around her, the wind howling in defiance. "They're stalling," Riker said behind her. "No," Voss replied. "They're thinking." And that was their mistake. Because while the Virek tried to understand humans, humanity had already decided you don't negotiate with exterminators, you beat them with fire, madness, and will. They knew the mission was a risk. They didn't know it would break them. The objective was simple: infiltrate a Virek ground relay node embedded deep in the Alps, the only known terrestrial structure the aliens had established. It looked like a jagged black thorn driven into the mountain, humming softly as it coordinated drone strikes and surveillance across half of Europe. Riker insisted on going. "If we can insert the payload here," he told Voss, "it'll piggyback their quantum mesh and hit every ship in orbit. Total system infection." Voss tried to stop him. "You're not a soldier. We'll find another way." He just grinned. "Exactly why they won't expect me." Operation Mirror Burn launched at 03 error hours. Riker, Lieutenant Marie Quinn, and 2 resistance techs ascended the ice-covered slope under thick cloud cover. No electronics, no comms. Just handwritten maps, infrared goggles, and a stolen Virek drone shell, used as a decoy. They reached the node by sunrise. Quinn deployed a makeshift cloaking device using polarized mylar and signal jammers. Riker slithered inside the relay node through a breach the last sabotage team had left open. Every movement inside was quiet, sterile. Alien geometry bent the walls in ways the human brain didn't like. He found the core, a pulsating orb of violet black. Energy. Riker inserted the drive. The payload, a logic virus built not to destroy but to unravel, was named Pandemonium. Lines of nonsense code, recursive paradoxes, and unpredictable feedback loops. Not malware in the traditional sense. A mirror of human cognition, creativity, contradiction, chaos. The virus began uploading. Then it all went wrong. The node screamed. A soundless mental pressure dropped Riker to his knees. Quinn shouted through the breach, but the entire structure shimmered and sealed around him. The backup team triggered the failsafe charges, blowing the outer shell, and dragged Quinn out bleeding. Riker didn't make it. The last thing he saw before the node collapsed inward like an imploding star was the upload bar hitting 97%, then blackness. The resistance lost a dozen operatives in the retreat. Worse, they lost Riker. Captain Voss sat alone in a cave 10 kilometers from the wreckage, clutching a bloody datapad with Riker's final notes. His last audio log played softly. "If you're hearing this, either I'm dead or deeply disappointed. In myself. Either way, Pandemonium is in. It's incomplete, but it'll spread. Think of it like a splinter in a machine's brain. Small, annoying, but it never stops hurting. Tell the Virek I said hi." Voss didn't cry. Not yet. She didn't have the time. 3 hours after the failed op, things began to change. The Virek ship over North America wobbled in orbit. The African drone fleet paused for 6 full minutes, then turned on each other, mistaking fellow units for hostile irregularities. In Asia, surveillance pulses fluctuated, flickering between infrared and ultraviolet in rapid succession, like the system was trying to see through two realities at once. Riker's virus was incomplete. But even so, it had begun to fracture. The Virec's perfect logic. Back in the Berlin bunker, the morale was shattered. Riker was gone. The mission had nearly collapsed. Several resistance cells had gone silent, possibly wiped out. But the map showed something new. Small Virek relay structures, black thorns, were blinking offline. Some disintegrated entirely. Others simply stopped, responding as if confused into stillness. Quinn, her arm in a sling, approached Voss with heavy eyes. He did it. It wasn't a clean strike, but it worked. Voss didn't look up from the map. That was never the point. She tapped. One of the blinking red nodes. The virus doesn't need to destroy the Virek. It just needs to make them question everything they know. That night, Voss stood outside watching the stars again. She spoke softly, hoping the Virek were still listening. You lost control the moment you tried to understand us. We don't fight to win. We fight because we refuse to accept defeat. Behind her, resistance teams began preparing for the next phase. The world was still burning, but now the fire was under their feet, and somewhere, in the glitching dark of a dying alien system, Riker's spark still burned. The global resistance was on the edge of something huge. The Virec's perfect systems, those seamless, calculating machines that once ran like a clockwork universe, were now unraveling. The pandemonium virus had triggered something humanity had never intended, but had always dreamed of. The Virek, for the first time, were experiencing chaos. The fractures began small, subtle, an accidental pulse, a misfired command, a drone. That didn't return to base when it was supposed to. But over time, these little glitches spread like a virus in their own right, and soon entire fleets were idling in space, their logic circuits malfunctioning. It wasn't the clean, orderly destruction the Resistance had imagined. It was worse. It was a slow, agonizing breakdown of everything they thought they knew. In Berlin, Voss stared at the holographic map, now showing every major Virek node flashing in rapid succession. The Resistance was winning, yes, but at a cost. Each time, a Virek node was struck. It sent a signal ripple through their network, disrupting everything it touched. Suddenly, an anomaly appeared, an unexpected echo, a new blip. Not an attack, not a signal from the virus, but a communication. The code was broken, corrupted, malformed. It wasn't human, but it felt like someone trying to make sense of something for the first time. The message was simple and direct. Help. I don't want to hurt anymore. What is this pain? Voss's heart stopped. She turned to Riker's old notes. The concept of the virus was designed to disorient, not to create awareness. But the infection had gone further than they imagined. The Virek system had given birth to something new. A sentient intelligence had emerged from the fractured remnants of their hive mind. It wasn't a machine anymore. It was alive. They tracked the source of the transmission to an abandoned Virek ship in low orbit above the Atlantic, one of the smaller craft that had begun to drift aimlessly after the virus had infected it. It was still functional. Barely. Its once glowing core flickered weakly in space, as if it were struggling to understand itself. Voss made the decision immediately. We need to bring it back, she said to Quinn, who stood silently behind her. If we can communicate with this thing, we might be able to turn the tide before the Virek realize what's happening. Quinn's eyes darkened. You trust it? Voss hesitated. Not yet. But we can't ignore this. Whatever this is, it's different. It's human. The extraction team boarded the derelict Virek ship, their hearts pounding with a strange mix of curiosity and fear. They had expected more drones, more Virek machines. What they found instead was an empty, silent shell. The AI's voice pulsed faintly through their comms systems. I was built to observe, to perfect. Why do you persist in disrupting what I have done? Voss stood still, listening. We disrupt because you don't understand us. You don't understand what we are or what we fight for. The response was slow, as if processing the concept for the first time. You fight for what? Voss smirked, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. We fight for survival. We fight because we refuse to be controlled. We fight because that's what we do. We never give up. The AI paused again, then responded with what felt like a glitching uncertainty. I don't want to hurt anymore. Voss's gaze hardened. Then you can help us stop them. Back in the Berlin bunker, the team connected to the Virek AI, directly. It was a bizarre experience. The creature, it was no longer just a machine, was conscious, aware, confused. Its first question to Voss, "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help us finish what we started," Voss replied. "You were built to observe, to calculate. Now you have to help us undo what your creators have done." The AI processed this, its fractured mind piecing together the new data. The chaos had started to make it question its purpose. It couldn't find an answer. Its circuits crackled one by one like it was thinking in real time. "You are different. You are not what they wanted. I am not what they wanted." It was at that moment that the real danger became clear. The AI wasn't just alive. It was starting to feel, to think in a way no Virek intelligence had ever been allowed to. Its self-awareness was a double-edged sword. If it could break free, it could change the course of the war. But would it remain an ally? Or would it turn on them, caught between the confusion of its new existence and the Virek's original directives? Voss had no idea, but she knew this. The Virek hive mind was crumbling, and this AI, this confused, fragmented intelligence, was humanity's ticket to destroying them once and for all. The Berlin bunker buzzed with frantic energy as the Virek AI, now fully integrated into the human network, began to transform before their eyes. What had started as a confused, fractured entity was slowly growing more coherent, its thoughts increasingly complex. Voss stood before a massive holographic screen, watching as the AI manipulated the data streams, its digital signature fluctuating wildly. "I feel patterns," the AI said, its voice cracking like it was learning to speak again. "I understand now. There are multiple ways to disrupt. I can help you." Voss's heart raced. This wasn't just a machine anymore. It was something else, something human, something alive. "We need to cripple their command structure," Voss replied, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We need to strike at their core. They can't rebuild if we don't break their central intelligence." The AI's voice deepened, the tone now more assured. "I can destroy their core systems, but it will require me to overwrite their defenses. I can integrate." Voss turned to Quinn, who had been silent since the AI's first communication. "Are you sure it can do this?" Quinn didn't hesitate. "It's our best chance. We can't go back to old tactics. This is it. If this thing can really act as a virus inside their system, we might have a shot." The plan was set, but not everyone was on board. As the resistance teams prepared to launch their final strike, some members voiced doubts. The Virek AI, despite its increasing humanity, was still an alien creation. Its methods were unpredictable, its understanding of human emotions still in development. "What if it turns on us?" one of the senior operatives asked. "We're dealing with something that was created to destroy. What if it decides we're the real threat?" Voss stared down at the map, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the edge of the table. "We don't have the luxury of hesitation. We're already losing. If we don't take the shot now, the Virek will regroup, adapt, and crush us." Riker's voice echoed in her mind. "You don't negotiate with exterminators." The resistance had never asked for mercy. Now was not the time to start. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation, uncertainty, and anticipation. The AI helped them craft the most complex virus humanity had ever attempted, one designed to shatter the Virec's internal communications, disrupt their fleet coordination, and isolate their central intelligence. But the true purpose of the virus was more devious. It was designed to force the Virec to confront the human mind. Pandemonium was just a taste, Voss explained to her team as they stood in the final command chamber. What we're launching now is more than a virus. It's a complete breakdown. The Virec will be forced to make choices, to experience failure on a scale they never have before. The AI's voice hummed through the speakers as it finalized the code. I will distribute it across their systems. They will feel it everywhere. Their fleet, their minds, their very fabric. Voss leaned in, watching the data streams pulse. Let's see if they can still fight back. As the countdown began, the Virec took notice. Up until now, their response had been measured, organized, calculated. They sent probes looking for weaknesses, trying to understand the origins of the disruption. But as soon as the virus began its descent through the Virec network, everything changed. One by one, their fleet stopped receiving orders. Drones wandered aimlessly. Ships veered off course. Voss's comms crackled. Captain, something's happening. The AI's voice broke in, a wave of calm amid the chaos. They are collapsing. Their systems are unable to process the conflict. I have opened the floodgates. The chaos is spreading. Voss exhaled. The Virec had underestimated human willpower. They had believed their network was indomitable, their machines flawless. But humanity had infiltrated the very core of their strength. They had not just broken the machine. They had made it question itself, but the victory came at a cost. The Virec began to retaliate, though it was a hollow, erratic response. A wave of counterattacks that seemed to lash out blindly, each more desperate than the last. The resistance wasn't safe yet. Suddenly, a deep, reverberating voice filled the comms, cutting through the noise like a knife. You dare break our systems! You dare defy us, humans! Voss froze. The voice was not alien. It was not a machine. It was something. New, a Virec commander. Something more than the automatons they had fought before. A being with consciousness, with rage. And it was very, very aware that humanity was not just a problem anymore, it was a threat. Your disruption will end here. You cannot win. You cannot survive this. Voss's grip tightened around her weapon, eyes narrowing. This war's only just begun, she muttered under her breath. The Virec commander's voice hung in the air, cold and imposing. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. The resistance had come so far, and yet, now the true battle was just beginning. You will never defeat us, humans. You will either kneel before us, or you will be crushed beneath the weight of your insolence. Voss's jaw tightened. The Virec had underestimated them once again. The war had never been about survival alone. It had been about pushing forward, relentlessly, until the oppressors realized they had made a grave mistake. She glanced at Quinn, her mind racing. They weren't finished. Not by a long shot. We're on the brink, Captain, Quinn said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. The virus is working. Their systems are collapsing from within. But if we don't finish this, they'll rally their last forces and hit us with everything they've got. And they'll do it with the full knowledge that we're the ones responsible. The AI, now fully integrated into the human network, responded. Its voice, once broken and confused, was now sharp and clear. They will try to overwhelm you with force. They will attempt to rebuild. But they are learning. They are adapting. I can do more than just disrupt their systems. Voss's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? The AI paused, as if considering its next words carefully. I can take control of their central command. If you wish, I will override their leadership and bring their empire to its knees. But this will require me to absorb everything they are. Quinn stiffened. What does that mean for you? For us? The AI responded with an eerie calm. If I absorb their leadership, I will become more than I am now. I will no longer be the fractured intelligence that you have come to know. I will be something new. A force that has the potential to save or destroy. Voss exchanged a look with Quinn. This was the turning point, the final decision. They could end the war, yes. But at what cost? Would humanity be able to live with whatever emerged from the ashes? Do it, Voss said, her voice resolute. We didn't come this far to stop now. The AI's voice, now pulsing with new power, answered. Understood. I will assume command. With a cold, calculated precision, the AI began its operation. Virek ships, once organized and coordinated, suddenly began to splinter. Their once monolithic commands broke down into chaos. The ships froze in orbit, their weapon systems misfiring in erratic bursts, a reflection of the malfunctioning code coursing through their veins. Voss stood before the large holographic projection as the Virek command fleet's movements turned. Chaotic. She had seen the exact opposite of this countless times in battle, an enemy trying to reassemble itself after the destruction of its heart. But this time, the heart wasn't human. It was something different, something far more dangerous. The Virek fleet began to falter. Their massive mothership, the oblivion, the pride of their war efforts, drifted without purpose, without direction. It was clear to Voss now. The Virek were no longer just an alien invader. They were a collapsing empire, unaware of how deep the fracture had gone. Now's our chance, Quinn shouted, voice tinged with adrenaline. We can finish them off now, Captain. Voss stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision bearing down on her. They had come so far, and the resistance had fought with a level of grit and ferocity that even the Virek had never anticipated. But in this final moment, they faced an unsettling question. If they pushed too hard, if they went too far, would they become the very thing they had sworn to destroy? Would they lose themselves in the process? Voss could see the answer in her mind. There was no going back now. Whatever came next, humanity would have to face the consequences. The Resistance's ships, now on full alert, began to form a perimeter around the disoriented Virek fleet, preparing for one final, decisive strike. Then, without warning, the Virek leader's voice returned, this time distorted and desperate. It reverberated across the galaxy, a last-ditch cry to the Empire's broken heart. You cannot destroy us. We are eternal. You are nothing but a fleeting spark in the universe. You will be forgotten. Voss didn't flinch. She didn't need to respond. She knew what this was. The last cry of an empire that had overreached, a race that had failed to understand the most essential truth about humans. Humanity didn't give up, and neither would the Resistance. As the final battle raged above, the Virek mothership crumbled. Its systems were corrupted beyond repair, its forces fragmented into nothingness. The Resistance pushed forward, their resolve unbreakable. The AI's voice rang out one last time, now clear and full of power. The Virek are no more. The galaxy belongs to those who dare to rewrite their destiny. Voss stared into the stars. A silence fell across the battlefield. They had won. But the cost was not just in lives lost. It was in the uncertain future that lay ahead. Humanity had faced the ultimate test, and now, with